All right, welcome to the planning session. I'm taking a look at the first batch of things that I'm going to do for Inktober. So the first thing that I've done is on a separate screen, I've pulled up all of the prompts. And the first prompts we're going to work with kind of today is mustache. Second one is weave. The third is crown. The fourth is murky. And the fifth is deer. So I am planning on doing as much with my robots as I can for this. And as I start to think about how I put these together, one of the biggest things that I'm processing is the boundaries of each piece, whether it's going to be a rectangular piece, a square piece, something more panoramic. Those are some of the early considerations that I'm trying to make. On top of that, I'm also going to try to figure out the composition. And so in these sketches, these early sketches, a lot of my goal is just to figure out what the overall feeling of that piece is going to be. Often as I get closer to the piece, especially for something like Inktober where I might spend a lot of time on it, I like to make sure that I've got better detail worked out as well. But at the beginning, I'm primarily working on composition and kind of sifting and sorting through ideas. Now I know for mustache, I'm going to be doing kind of a goofy one of my robots. This is a guy I've probably never drawn on the channel before. He has a head that looks a little bit like a potato. And then he's got a big mustache that, of course, because he's a robot, is pretty geometric in the way that it's put together. He's also got glasses. I think he's got a cleft chin. I've got some photos of him, so I'll look him up and remind myself exactly what he looks like. Just got a couple hairs up here. But basically a dude who is not cool at all, but thinks that he's cool. And I like ideas like that. So it's going to be kind of like this, and he's got a little teeny skinny neck, and he comes out like that, probably a little chubby. He's got shorts on because robots need clothes too, and scrawny little legs, and then probably big old boots because that'll be fun. And of course he's got to be standing like this with his arms on his hands on his hips. And then of course we've got to have a big old cape blowing. So he's going to be something kind of like that. I do have some more drawings of him that will be a little bit more accurate and achieve what I'm looking for in a better fashion. But that's going to be kind of the character. So the big thing right now to sort out is how do I make this look interesting and dynamic in a way that I want. So I've kind of thought about perhaps having him, as a figure standing on the top of a building, all this kind of blacked in, and him standing there. But it also might be kind of fun to have him, like, let's say we've got this giant robot that's like been defeated and is smoking, and this is like the wreck and the refuse of its body. And this character's name is Brick, by the way. And we could have Brick kind of just like standing up on top of this, the same kind of defiant pose. I kind of like the idea of taking this character and in some dynamic way making him look like he's saved the day, even though he doesn't look like the kind of guy who should be able to save the day at all. And it would be really fun to have him like standing on top of this big robotic head, maybe this big jaw with grinding teeth, and like smoke is coming out, maybe wires and broken parts here, and maybe there's a big strong hand that's like gripping at the earth, and Brick's just standing there on top. So something like that might be kind of fun, depending on how I put it together. Thinking about the rule of thirds and how everything is segmented out there, trying to make sure that the composition is orientated in a decent way. I don't think orientated is the correct way to say that. Sometimes the Brits will say it that way. Oriented is how we'd say that in American English. But I also like something like this, where I'm kind of thinking of like the Dark Knight stuff, how you might have seen Batman put together before. This idea that we've got like the building that he's up upon, and standing there silhouetted in the dark sky or something, lit maybe from below by this really striking light. So that's probably kind of what I'm going to do for Mustache. It's kind of just put this guy together. Now for weave, let's do a 1 up here so we know where we're at. So for weave, there's a chance that I'm going to do a robotic kraken. I did have one that I've worked with, and in the past, the idea for this guy was that he was, all of the titans that I have in this story that are machines are all built out of like the refuse and reused things from our world. And so there's a dragon where like his head is the bucket of a like an excavator, which I thought would be really cool. And originally I did this squid, the kraken, with a skyscraper as his body, but that makes a little bit less sense. I'm kind of wondering about maybe using a silo for that structure, and so it might be something like this. And then I think for weave, the reason that that prompt comes to mind is that you could have the tentacles kind of woven together. That might not be the best way to interpret that, but that's at least how my brain went with it initially. So that might be something that I do. So, and again, you might be noticing that right off the bat with these kind of sketches, I will often think about the subject that is going to be in there. Like it's the, you know, if I had a way that I do this, like the planning is essentially subject. Like I'll sketch out, let's put that in there too. I'll just sketch out the subject, and then I'll work on the composition. And then I think about things like lighting, and then I'll finally get to detail. So just like I did with brick here, I'll sketch that out first. And again, like I'm gonna put in way more time, but this is just my initial thinking about how I'm structuring these things. Because once I've got the initial sketch, the initial idea kind of broken out in a way that makes sense to me, I can process it when I'm not sitting in front of my sketchbook while I'm, you know, driving or taking a walk or working out or something. I can be processing the ideas that I've already started to work on. You might also be wondering why I'm doing the sketching with a pen and not a pencil. Pens can't be erased. And I think that erasing your sketches when you're in the planning process is one of the worst things you can do, because you end up doing things differently when you're working with a pen. You kind of know subconsciously that you can't erase it, so you have a tendency to do things with a little bit more sureness. And also, it leaves the evidence for everything you've done, which I think is super important. You'll come back to things later sometimes and look at a sketch that went awry, but in truth, it's just a hunk of clay that can be turned into something. And sometimes later on, that's exactly the chunk of clay that you're going to need in order to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. What I'm thinking about here is how are these tentacles going to work? I don't think they are going to be individual segments like that. That's what I was kind of thinking there for a moment. But I think actually they will just be kind of cordage of some kind. It could even be where they're open at the end, and so they're like there's electricity to them, perhaps. But this, I don't like. I don't like the idea of that. But again, like you have to kind of sketch out an idea. Ooh, can you hear that? We've got a rainstorm going. That was a little bit of thunder. I suppose if this video ends early, it's because the power cut. But you have to sketch things out in order to know, like, is that close at all to what you want to do? And what I would need to do is figure out how I'm going to then position this creature, this character, in an interesting way that's dynamic. So I'm kind of thinking, like, what if we have the Kraken like here, and the tentacles are coming up like at something. We've got like characters who are involved in that process. This is a good time to mention too, I may be combining some of the prompts. Sorry, that is off the screen again. I have just reconstructed my studio space, and so I'm not sure where everything is anymore. And if you're hearing more of an echo, it's because there's like I've taken everything off the walls because I had to get this room painted. So if you're getting a little bit more of an echo, I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll pick it up in post, and then I'll be annoyed by it, and I'll probably fix it for next time. But Yeah, all these things that you didn't necessarily want to know. But I might be combining some of the prompts. There are 31, and so if this is weave, for example, if I really wanted to get crazy with this, I could say this is a starfish and use it for the starfish prompt, but I can't do that. I wouldn't feel good about it. But I could use something like reckless or heavy or ragged or any of those. I could use Arctic for this. So there's a lot of other kind of prompts that I could combine into this. I like the idea of them getting attacked by the giant squid. So I think I'm going to try to experiment with some compositions that work well for that. I'll probably do this one as a pretty big drawing. And I wonder if I could even do something where it's like an iceberg that they're on, like some of these characters. And don't want to make that too symmetrical. And so this is like ice cold water down here. And you've got this squid. I mean, I know obviously squid aren't going to attack like that, but yeah, they're robots. You can do what you want. So you could actually have like the tentacles coming up here over the side, things like that. And then I could have these characters who are fighting it. Could even have one that's like held up here, have another that's like attacking one of the tentacles. This is probably going to be a sketch that's going to work better, like the bigger it is, the more pulled out. You know, if I have like this, and then got this big monster back here, so I've got plenty of negative space around it. Sorry, again, you can't see that. Let me move something real quick. All right, we're back. All right, there we go. So maybe something like this, where you got much more negative space here on the side, where all of this, wrong pen. Got too many things over here. There we go. Where like all of this would be just negative space. You might be thinking that's a heck of a lot of negative space, but yeah, that allows you also to focus on the details of the other things. So that's kind of my like initial thoughts on weave. So let's go to crown. I kind of like the idea here of doing crown more metaphoric. So if perhaps instead of having a literal crown, I could have the character who is currently like reigning over all the others. So what if we had this really elongated thing, and you've got this back here, and you've got like a throne of some kind, you know, all these cords and whatnot. And I don't know where, I would have to think about, like, is this a like room or outside? I don't know which way I would go with this, but it could easily have like the character sitting here. And that would be indigo. So this would be crown. So yeah, like the character who is in authority right now. So who wears the metaphoric crown. That could be really intriguing. Indigo is this one-eyed character who is a sibling to the main character. It's just like an X that he wears over that eye, and he wears lots of fancy things to hide it because he's self-conscious. So he has a very good collection of fancy hats that he wears. But he is not really a bad guy, though a lot of the things that he's done have been rather bad, because he unfortunately had to take on all the responsibilities of his sibling when she went missing, and so he's been trying to do the job of two folks for the last 200 years, and so he's a little miffed about it. And I have a decent drawing of him over here somewhere, so I'm going to have to find a drawing of him as well and figure out how I'm going to do that. And I love robots, and I love ballpoint pens for sketching. Like, obviously this is not quite what I'm looking for, but it's just nice to be able to like slap something together quick that gives some reasonable idea of what something might look like. Get the hand on here and the staff. Because every Dark Lord needs a staff, right? You know, he's got his cloak. But again, if he's going to be sitting on this throne, I kind of want him to sit in a lazy way where he's like very much... You very much get the idea, like, this guy's not stoked about the fact that he's here. So probably kind of looking pensive here, where the other, legs just like dragging down, and this arm's over here just haphazardly holding the staff. He's got this big illustrious throne, but like he does not want to be there kind of thing. So I think that's probably what I'll do for crown, and I'll take a look too at some of these others and see if there's other ones of these that I can pull in, because I'm sure I can pull in some of the other prompts. So I think when I do the next round of these, I will take a peek and try to make sure that I've got some of those others kind of incorporated. Number 4 is Murky. And Murky's kind of interesting because to me that has to do with fog, and foggy scenarios are kind of difficult to do with pen, especially when I'm mostly going to be using things like this that are just straight up black. So that obviously means like if you're doing something along those lines, you're probably doing some pretty thin hatching to just imply things and not actually using gray. If you're doing this digitally, or if you're using other mediums, especially if you're using watercolor, like Murky might be better. It might be kind of fun to do something where you've got like almost zombies coming out of the mist. So if you have like a little trail, maybe trees of some kind, except everything in this world is robotic. So you got the trees of some kind, and you've got like creepy figures coming out of the mists. But I would really have to think about how I'm going to do that if I am going to truly try to put this together in a way where I'm doing this only with my black inks. And of course, I can modify things. I could do this with ink and then do like a large watercolor wash over it so things are gray. And maybe I will. Maybe that would be a really good way to do this. But I kind of like the idea of that. This also brings up the idea of having like a party of some kind that is the characters that we're following. And so I'm going to have to think about who all's included there, and probably have to do some sketches on each of those characters and get them worked out, because this will be a good excuse to make sure that they all exist. And it's probably going to be, well, I can save that for another video. I'll work on my characters, getting them all put together and all the stuff that comes along with that. So, but I think that's what I'll do for Murky. And I think at least once or twice I'm going to have the party here, and I think it's going to be probably five guys, 5 characters or so. I don't know how many of the Titans I'll work on, but we'll see. So I think Murky is going to be something I'm going to have to play with a little bit more. I'm going to have to really think about how do I want to do these trees, since everything's mechanical. I haven't thought about how I'm going to put them together. Would be kind of interesting to have like electric trees, or just do them in like a really creepy fashion. But I haven't really thought about that yet. And maybe things are kind of incorporating together. Like there's an element of it being biological and mechanical. But the next one after that is deer. And I have not come up with a good way to do this for the robots, so I might be doing this with something else. And if I do that, there's a good chance that I will work with deer skulls and skeletons, because that's fun. And I might do kind of a demonic thing from my fantasy novel, where these creatures called the Tanari basically absorb the thoughts and feelings and emotions and dreams and nightmares of mortal beings, and that's what they feed on. Almost like a vampire, but they don't kill the things. They just suck out ambition, which is maybe worse. And they are basically creatures of nightmare. And so a lot of the time they are comprised of forms that humans or mortals would find particularly scary, because they're built off of the things that humans are dreaming of, whether they're good or bad. And so you get really creepy forms where, this is not something that could biologically exist, but it is something that exists here. I did one 2 years ago for Inktober, though I think back then I wasn't really doing content that was specifically Inktober. I was just doing sketchbook sessions that had those guys, and there's some really cool ones there. And if I can find it, I will link that guy in the video as well, assuming this goes on YouTube. And that'll be kind of a fun thing to play with. But I think that'll be another callback. I think I'll come back to that again. But if I can find a way in the sketching process, I might look up robot deer. I might do some investigating on Horizon Zero Dawn and see if there's something there that can kind of serve as an inspiration that I can work with, or I might just do something different. That's one of the cool parts about Inktober, is that it's because it's a thing that you are doing because you want to. It's voluntary. It's something where you can change things up if you want to. So I do like to try to stick to the prompts as best I can, mostly because it forces me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. And I think that's really beneficial when your goal is to improve as an artist. And so I will basically force myself to do that unless it really just becomes not fun at all. But I don't always. For Smogus last year, I actually subbed out one of the last ones because one of the dragon prompts was rail, and I could not find anything that was intriguing to me, and I couldn't come up with an idea for it. So I was like, nah, I'm subbing that out for something different. I don't remember what I subbed it out for, but sometimes you got to. But there's also a chance that I'll come up with a deer-based robot of some kind, especially if I can find a humorous way to do that. I think that would be really cool, but we shall see. So we are already 21 minutes into this, or pretty close to it, depending on how much I've edited out. And I'm only on prompt 5. So I will plan on doing a bunch more of this, but mostly I just wanted to share kind of my thoughts as I'm going to be pulling these apart and thinking about it, and also hopefully be encouraging to you as you are thinking about these things, because it takes a while. Like, this has been 20 minutes. I don't have any ideas solved. All I've done is come up with some ideas and basically ease my anxiety about the whole process. Like, it doesn't feel like it's something that's floating around in my brain in the ether now. Like, this exists. This is something that I can chew on. If I had to start tomorrow, I could start tomorrow. Today is September 16th, so I'm still, 14, 15 days ahead of time, but October will be here before I know it. So yeah, these are just kind of my first initial sketches and ideas. I am going to be chewing on this, and when I come back and do the next one, I am sure that I will have combined some of these ideas together. But I will probably communicate that as I do this, because I think being honest and authentic about how you do it is really beneficial. So anyway, I hope this has been beneficial for you, whether you were drawing along or listening or thinking or, trying to take advice, whatever it is. I hope it was of benefit to you. Well, have a good one, y'all. I'll see you soon. See you next time. I hope you enjoy and you're looking forward to Inktober 2025.